Can the New York Mets push the NLCS to a seventh game? We'll talk about it on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. This episode's brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB. You're going to win $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, we got Game 6 to preview on today's show. Mets versus Dodgers. Sean Manaea versus TBD. Dodgers bullpen game. And that's where I want to open up the show today, because as much as we can talk about Sean Manaea's importance to the New York Mets in this game, and we'll get to that in the next segment, the Dodgers are the more interesting team to discuss right now because we have no idea what they're going to do. It's going to be a bullpen game. So what does that mean? Yoshinobu Yamamoto, he's done for this series. Jack Flaherty is done for this series. Walker Buehler is being held for Game 7. Brent Honeywell threw 67 pitches in Game 5, so you can pretty much guess that he's not going to be in there. But everyone else is all hands on deck. And I ultimately look at the rest of this series and believe that the Mets' only shot to really win it is by bashing their way to the World Series. It's that simple to me. Yes, Manaea, Severino, the Mets have some, they're two guys, right? They're two horses that, for the most part, got them here on the mound, and that is all fine and well. Can I envision a scenario where the Mets win either of these games by a score of 3-2? No, I cannot. And hey, hopefully I just jinxed that and the Mets do win Game 6 by a score of 3-2, and we can all be shocked. But when you look at that lineup on the Dodgers side, what we've seen from Shohei Ohtani, Mookie Betts, the at-bats that they've gotten from guys like Max Muncy and Tommy Edman, and all of a sudden Andy Pajes. I mean, that team's going to score. But we just saw the New York Mets in Game 5 put together an outstanding game. We saw Starling Marte with the 3 doubles. We saw Pete Alonso with another massive home run. Lindor continue to do his thing. Brandon Nimmo, great at bat after great at bat. Jeff McNeil inserted in there, couple sac flies. Jesse Winker, who the Mets just always win now when he's in the starting lineup. So someone tweeted out today, I think they're 6-1 when Jesse Winker starts, and I was at 1-4 when he doesn't. Does that add up? 1-3. Regardless, this game and this series is all on the shoulders of the Mets lineup because they can put the Dodgers into some uncomfortable situations. On the pitching side, the Mets are going to be pressed no matter how this thing goes. I, again, would be shocked to see Sean Manaea pitching in the 7th inning of this game. I don't think that's going to happen. So you're going to need to score runs. The question is, who are you scoring those runs against? How are the Dodgers going to line it up? I want to go through Dave Roberts' options and how he might play his hand, because he has that game in hand. He can play for Game 7 if he wants to. And we've seen that in this series. Game 2, he starts with Ryan Brazier against the Mets lineup in the bullpen game. Then he goes to Landon Knack for that second inning, and Knack gives up 5 runs. And at that point, he puts in Brent Honeywell, which is almost his white flag, and says, all right, try to keep the game close. But he stays away from Blake Trinan, Michael Kopech, Evan Phillips. Those are the guys that he believes, he puts them out there, they're going to put up zeros. So those are the ones that he wants to keep in his back pocket. So when you think about a Game 6 with a Game 7 looming, they're not going to go to those guys early. If you look at what they did against the Padres, right? This was Game 4, which is essentially the same thing as what they're going to head into here in a Game 6, except for, I guess, in that game for the Dodgers, they were trailing in the series in the NLCS. They had to win it. But regardless, they went to Ryan Brazier to start. He got 4 outs. Anthony Banda got 2 outs. So that got them through the second inning. Came back around to the top of the Padres lineup. They had a lead. They went to Kopech. Kopech gave them 1 inning. Then they went to Alex Vesia, who they don't have in this series. Vesia got hurt. But Vesia gave them 5 outs, came back to the top of the lineup again. Evan Phillips came on to face Tatis, got them out of the 5th inning, stayed on to face Profar, Machado, and Merrill, got them through the 6th. Daniel Hudson came on for the 7th. That was the bottom of the Padres lineup. Came right back around to the top. Even though the Dodgers were winning big, they went to Blake Trinan. And then once they got through that, they're winning 8-0. They closed it out with Landon Knack in that game 4. So that just gives you an idea of what they're going to try to do to the New York Mets. If all things are equal, the game is close, the Dodgers have a lead, they're going to go to Kopech, to Evan Phillips, and to Blake Trinan when it comes to the top of the Mets lineup. Those are the guys that they're going to want to have face Lindor, Nimmo, Vientos, and Alonso. That's the direction they're going to want to go. But I don't think they're going to open the game there, particularly with Game 6, right? Because they have Game 7. They can always save those guys, put them in their back pocket if they need to. So they're going to open it up with somebody else. Maybe it is Ryan Brazier again. Maybe it's Daniel Hudson this time. Maybe they just want to give the Mets a different look. Maybe it's Ben Casparias, who's a rookie who has pitched 3 scoreless innings in this series, has not allowed a hit, walked just 1, struck out 4. He is a starting pitcher by trade, so maybe they go to him. We'll see how they play it. Here are the guys that I don't think we're going to see in this game. You're not going to see Yamamoto, Flaherty, or Buehler. That's obvious. You're not going to see Brent Honeywell through the 67 pitches in Game 5. I think if you see Edgardo Henriquez, that means the Mets are ahead and potentially ahead big. 22-year-old rookie has more career innings pitched in the postseason than he does in the regular season right now because he just got added to the roster, had 3 1/3 in the regular season, 5 innings so far in October. He gave up 3 runs to the Padres in that other series, and then he's allowed just 1 run across 4 innings against the Mets, 2 2-inning spurts. But I don't think they're going to go to him unless the game has started to get out of hand. And then the same thing could be said with Landon Knack. Considering the fact that Landon Knack sort of torpedoed their last bullpen game, another guy who's a starting pitcher, made 12 starts this year, pitched to a 3.65 ERA. I think Knack comes in if the game gets out of hand a little bit. So the guys that he's going to want to go to, it's Brazier, Banda, Hudson, Phillips, Trinan, and Kopech. Now, that right there is 6 guys to cover 9 innings. How many of their guys are going to give them 2 innings in a game that they're not positive they're going to get with Game 7 still looming? I don't think they necessarily will push these guys much more than 4 outs potentially. So you look at the fact that they're going to have to use someone like Ben Casparias. I wonder if that happens at the beginning of the game or if it's Brazier to Casparias, see what happens. Maybe it's Brazier to Banda. You go to one of the high leverage guys, and then in the middle innings, we get to the bottom of the Mets lineup, you go to Casparias. It's going to be interesting how they piece it together. But the advantage for the Mets is that it is really tough to get 7 guys all having their best possible game at once. Like to have 7 guys all take the mound and have a good night, that's tough. Okay. And they're playing the odds on that just because they have to. They don't have a better option. If they had Tyler Glass now available, if they had, name all their pitchers that are out. They have a ton of guys that are out right now. Clayton Kershaw. If they had their starting pitchers healthy, they would not be doing this. But they trust their bullpen to get the job done. It's just a chess game for Dave Roberts to see how he plays it. And we talked about this in the last game, right? Where I sort of mentioned how, if the Mets were able to get to Jack Flaherty and they get up, you're not going to see the best relievers coming out. And the same thing Game 4 with Buehler, with Yamamoto, Game 3 with Buehler. That's always sort of been the thing, right? They're going to hold on to those chips if they have to, right? If it's not a game that looks completely winnable, where it's a run or 2 difference, they might just hold on to those guys. And then you have to do what the Mets did in Game 5 and continuously add when you're facing the B or C relievers from that Dodgers bullpen. So it really is on the Mets lineup shoulders here. They have to score a lot of runs. This series, the team has not won by scoring anything less than 7 runs. And that was the Mets in Game 2. Every other game has been 8 runs or more. And it seems to be escalating. As these games go on, the scores get higher and higher. So it is imperative that the Mets have a good day offensively. If Ben Casparia starts it off and is cruising and retires the Mets lineup in order through 3 innings, matching Sean Manaea, you're in trouble. The Mets have to not only score runs, they need to be disciplined in their approach. They need to be, taking their walks when they get them, because every single walk, every single extra batter that the Dodgers bullpen has to face, that is another move in your favor in the chess game that's going to be trying to win 2 games in LA. So it's really on the Mets lineup more than anyone else, more than Sean Manaea. As much as you say, all right, Sean Manaea's the ace, go pitch the Mets into game 7, and he is a huge advantage for the Mets in this one. We'll talk about it, but to me, this series, it all boils down to the Mets lineup. They have to be better. They have to out-hit Ohtani, Betts, and company and get the job done. And when it comes to who's going to start, Jesse Winker is going to be in there. Carlos Mendoza all but committed to that. He did not commit as strongly to Jeff McNeil, although I think they probably will stick with the same lineup that got them to this point as far as in game 5. So you're going to see Lindor, Nimmo, Vientos, Alonso, Winker, and Marte. That's your top 6. No doubt about it. Now, whether you have Iglesias or McNeil in the lineup will determine the order of the bottom 3. If Iglesias is in there, he probably bats behind Marte with Taylor in the 8 hole, Alvarez batting 9th. I like having that lefty bat to break up all of those righties at the bottom of the lineup, and that's where I think Jeff McNeil should be right back where he was in that last game in the 8th spot with Taylor batting 7th, and you just roll with the same lineup and see where it takes you. But again, it's going to come down to those guys. They have to score in this game, because if they can get up on this Dodgers bullpen, that's just going to help the Mets save as many bullets as they can on the pitching front for a game 7. It'll do the same thing for the Dodgers, right? The Mets jump all over Brazier and whoever else they see early, and it's 6-0 Mets, and Manaea is cruising. Well, Dave Roberts is going to start to play for game 7 too, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Again, it's still on the Mets to tack on to the Henriquez's of the world so that you keep those guys in the stable. For the Dodgers, that's fine. You let it all play out in game 7, but you have to get there first. And if Sean Manaea does not have a good start, that still could absolutely cripple the Mets. So that's what we're going to talk about next. Does Sean Manaea have another gem in him? We'll go through it. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. You watch the winnings roll in. Get on daily action with your friends and become part of the Prize Picks community today, where you can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. So you can turn $10 into $1,000. Cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this football season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds. Turn your sports opinions into real money all season long. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB. You're going to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports when you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Our goal is to get to 11,000 subscribers by the end of the postseason. I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. Also, make sure you have that notification bell turned on, so I'll be going live after Game 6 to break down everything we watch, whether it's a Mets victory or, unfortunately, the end of the season. Now, Sean Manaea is going to play a big role in deciding that for the Mets. You have your ace on the hill. You feel really good. We've been talking about this since this series opened up, right? The strategy that the Mets employed, starting it off with Kodai Senga, that blew up in their face, but at least allowed them to set up Sean Manaea versus the Dodgers bullpen twice. And we sort of knew that no matter how the series shaked out, they were going to have to win this matchup 2 times. It was a given. It didn't feel like the Mets are going to be able to win this series in 5 games. Although you might have dreamed about that after the Game 2 victory and just thought, hey, maybe the Mets go home and sweep. It was unlikely. It always was. So the hope was you get to Game 6 with a chance to clinch. Now, instead, you're in Game 6 with your back against the wall, but you have the right guy on the hill. I don't know how much Sean Manaea has left in the tank, though, because he said he sort of ran out of gas in his last start. Now, he did get 5 days rest again, but this guy has thrown a lot of innings this year. Let me actually look up how many he's thrown. He got over 180 in the regular season, and I'd imagine he's close to 15 in the postseason. Let me see where we're at. 17 in the postseason. So he's now sitting at 198 and 2/3 innings pitched on the year. Remember, last year he was in a swingman role. So he did throw over 100 innings, 117 and 2/3. And the 2 prior years, he was a regular starting pitcher. So he got over 150 each time. But it's still a huge innings jump this year. And he's pitching deep into October for the first time, a very long time. Can't remember how many deep runs the A's had when he was at his best and they were at his best. But regardless, you're still asking a lot out of Sean Manaea. And so I don't expect him to pitch too deep into this game. I think the goal for Manaea here is just get through the first 4 innings with a lead. Get through the first 4, and anything after that is gravy. If you can get through 5, that's amazing. If he gets any outs in the 6th, I mean, that is a huge blessing. But these playoff games, they come at you so fast. And I think Carlos Mendoza will have a quicker hook this time than he did in game 2, where he let Manaea, pitch himself into a jam there, and then Phil Maton had to bail him out in that 6th inning. I think the first sign of trouble, barring it being in the first inning, I think he's going to go to that pen. That's going to be a big swing point in this series because the Mets might win, but you can win the battle and lose the war because Sean Manaea might have to get pulled in the 3rd inning. And let's just say that happens, right? And to get through this game, it required 2 innings out of Phil Maton and 35 pitches from Ryan Stanek, and Reed Garrett had to go 35 pitches, and Edwin Diaz had to get 7 outs and go 42 pitches. And now you're just in a position where who's even going to throw game 7? And that's where the Dodgers would have a huge advantage because maybe they were able to hold on to some of their chips and they were able to then go to them, or maybe all the guys pitched, but they only pitched 1 inning apiece. So getting length out of Sean Manaea is going to be key, but I wouldn't expect 7 innings, right? It's, can he get through 4 first and foremost? Because if he does, and let's just say you can get 4 outs from Maton, 4 outs from Stanek, maybe you get an inning out of Garrett, you get 4 outs from Edwin Diaz, that covers the game. And then you regroup and see what you have in a game 7. But getting at least 12 outs from Sean Manaea would be huge. Getting 15 plus would be a godsend to this bullpen because as much as they can save themselves for a potential game 7, when you're thinking about that long run, it's going to be important. Now, the one wild card is Kodai Senga. Carlos Mendoza said he will be available in the bullpen just like he was the prior game. Now, Kodai Senga is wild card is the perfect description because I have no idea what they'd get from him, and I don't know when they would turn to him. If they didn't go to Kodai Senga in a game that they were winning by 5 runs, 6 runs, they had so many chances where they could have turned it to Senga in game 5, and they didn't. I don't know if they're going to do that here necessarily. I think the scenario we see Kodai Senga might be a slugfest where Manaea gets knocked out early. So the game is still close enough, right? Let's just say Sean Manaea gets through the first inning, has a rough second, starts to get into trouble in the 3rd, and they go to Stanek just to get out of a jam. And maybe Stanek pitches the 3rd and the 4th, and the game is sort of stabilized, and maybe it's 7-6. Mets got a lead. They might have to go to Kodai Senga to just try to buy some outs. Or they have to exhaust absolutely everything to get through this game. So this is where Carlos Mendoza is going to have to really make his hay. He's got to figure this thing out. And he doesn't have as many good options as Dave Roberts does, particularly when you think about how much Stanek and Garrett were pressed, and even Diaz, just to get to this point. So we'll see what happens. Maybe Sean Manaea defies all odds of what I'm saying here about him being worn down and tired. Maybe the Dodgers are uber aggressive. He's just throwing that fastball up in the zone, getting weak contact, doing his thing, and he's sitting at 65 pitches through 5 innings, and he goes back out there and he gets you through 6, and you're just awed by what this guy does. I'm not going to count Sean Manaea out entirely to do that, but I still believe that these games have gone to the bullpen sooner and sooner. And I mean, you saw it. David Peterson had a chance with a left on left matchup and a clearly hobbled Freddie Freeman to get out of a jam and maybe get the Mets through 4 innings. And potentially, if you get past Freddie Freeman, maybe you could have pushed Peterson beyond that. And Carlos Mendoza went to the fresh arm and Reed Garrett and got out of that jam. So I think you might see similar managing in this one. So this is where, again, it comes back down to the lineup ultimately. The Mets are going to have to score to force a game 7. I believe that they can win this one. Beyond that, we'll talk about it if we get to that point. But it's going to be exciting to see the Mets with their ace on the mound, with a lineup that just scored 12 runs, and having a relatively available bullpen because of the off day, go out and win one more game. And then game 7, anything can happen. What we're going to close the show with is talking about what the Mets had to play for here, because something happened in the other league today that I want to discuss just for a little bit. And then also my final read on it. Are the Mets going to push a game 7? We'll talk about it in just a minute. First, though, another quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can now start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So you get the hunch in the middle of the game. You can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. So when you place your first $5 bet, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Maybe you believe that Pete Alonso is going to hit a home run in this game. You throw $5 on that and the home run prop, and you're going to win no matter what, because those $200 in bonus bets are going to be guaranteed there waiting for you. Win or lose. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sports book. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure to become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks from the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways and get a lineup graphic sent to your phone each day so you know the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, so what are the Mets playing for? Well, obviously a chance to win the World Series, but we now know who they would be squared off against. The New York Yankees have made it to the World Series. They beat the Guardians in 5 games. Rob Manfred was seen in the offices of Major League Baseball in New York City, just spraying champagne over everybody. They are so thrilled because it's going to be Yankees, Dodgers, or Yankees, Mets. They prefer Yankees, Dodgers. Don't get it twisted. They don't want to see the Mets in the World Series, because if you get the Dodgers in there, it's Ohtani versus Judge, Soto, Betts, all of the stars align, East Coast, West Coast. You play into your 2 biggest markets. It's a dream World Series. If they could have Yankees versus Dodgers every single year, they would sign up for it. That's what they want. But the consolation prize is Mets versus Yankees. So the baseball fan wins, I think, because either you're going to see the 2 teams that on paper were supposed to make it, and the Dodgers and the Yankees, and that just never happens. Or you're going to see a Subway World Series, which is going to be a ton of fun, and there will be so much Juan Soto discussion if it is Mets Yankees, where it's like, hey, does the winner just get Soto? How's that work? Speaking of Juan Soto, he's the one that gets them to the World Series. Hits a huge 3-run homer in extra innings to deliver the Yankees to the Fall Classic for the first time since 2009. So now Mets fans, we don't have that argument in our back pocket anymore. Who was the last New York team to make the World Series? Now it's the Yankees. It's no longer the Mets. It's been the Mets since 2015, so it's been a long time since the Yankees have been there. And I hated seeing Soto have that moment in a Yankees uniform because, of course, I don't want to be too attached to those pinstripes. You want to come over and take Steve Cohen's money, which is going to be more, and go play with Francisco Lindor. But that is off-season discussion. We're not there yet. We'll see if we're going to be there by the end of tonight. But when it comes to this Game 6, just like I said going into Game 5, that morning podcast that day, I said, look, I don't know if I'm optimistic the Mets can win the series, but I am optimistic that they'll win Game 5. I feel the same way about this Game 6. This is a Mets team that's not going to go out quietly. I believe in this lineup. I believe that Francisco Lindor can set the tone again, or will set the tone again in that first inning of a bullpen game where I don't think he's going to see Evan Phillips, Michael Kopech, or Blake Trinan. I think he's going to see a matchup that he can take full advantage of, just like he did against Ryan Brazier, who he might just face again here in this game 6. I think Mark Vientos is due after going 0 for 5. I just absolutely love everything I've seen out of Starling Marte and Jesse Winker. And Pete Alonso has had magic in his bat this October. He's had some big moments. Not to mention Francisco Alvarez is starting to swing it pretty well. And that guy's due for a playoff homer. So I love the Mets' chances in this game. I really do. Obviously, the Dodgers are going to be tough. If they throw their A relievers, if this game stays close, it's going to be an absolute nail biter. It's going to be agonizing. And I think the Dodgers have to be favored in a close game because of the relievers they have, because of the bats they have. And to be honest, because of the relievers the Mets have. Because as good as Edwin Diaz has looked in his most recent appearances, we know it's been hot and cold this year. And beyond Edwin Diaz, this Mets bullpen, while they've gotten some great performances from Ryan Stanek, and I have full faith in him, and Reed Garrett has had his moments, and Phil Maton has even had his moments, it's not Trinan, Phillips, Kopech. It's just not. So hopefully the Mets can score a bunch of runs here, but I believe with Sean and I on the mound going up against the Dodgers bullpen, the Mets will have an advantage in this game. When it comes to my optimism that they'll advance to the World Series, that's where I'm still a little less optimistic if I'm just being completely honest and I'm not being biased. Of course, I've watched this team play like a team of destiny, and deep down, I still feel like they are a team of destiny that can not only make it to the World Series, but can beat the New York Yankees in that World Series, and maybe even do it in convincing fashion and really just show how great they are. Because if they are able to climb this mountain and beat that Dodgers team down 3-1, I just can't see the Yankees standing in the Mets' way. So I still have that faith in the Mets. But if I was to pull my bias out of it, and if I was to just look at it from an analyst perspective, just look at the facts, look at these teams, I think the Mets might exhaust everything in game 6 and just run out of steam in game 7. I hope that's not the case. I hope Luis Severino gets the ball in a game 7, gets to that point, and he just shoves and he gives the Mets everything and has one of those starts that we look back on like, oh my gosh, Luis Severino, game 7 against the Dodgers. Can you believe he went 7 strong innings? It was just absolutely everything they needed. Like, I hope we get those stories. I hope we get more legacy. I hope we get, more guys that can add moments where they're going to walk around New York City and never have to pay for a meal again. I hope all of that happens. But the Mets are still an uphill battle here. There's no doubt about it. But at this point, all that matters is getting to a game 7. I asked the audience today on a poll on YouTube, do you believe the New York Mets are going to make it? And 84% of the audience believes this thing's going to 7. Now, it's a Mets audience, so what are you going to do? 60% think the Mets are going all the way. That'll tell you what you need to know. And I appreciate that from a fan base that can be pessimistic at times. It helps coming off a 12-6 victory. If I put the exact same poll in front of you after game 4, it would have probably been flipped. But the fans believe right now in this team. Only 16% of the audience thinks the Mets are going to lose this game, game 6. And we'll see what happens tonight. It's going to be a lot of fun. We get a little more baseball. Hopefully, we have 2 games and then maybe a whole other series to talk about. But for now, that's going to be all for this edition of Locked On Mets. I'll be back for a full show breaking this thing down, a live stream right after the game, whether it's the Mets have pushed it to 7 or it's an end of the season type of recap here. And then we'll still have a show for you on Monday, regardless, 6 o'clock in the morning. So make sure if you're watching on YouTube, you hit that subscribe button. If you are listening on the audio side, follow, rate, review, wherever you get your podcast. You can follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show, Locked On Mets. If you want to be Locked On Mets Insider, find a link in the episode description or go to subtext.com/Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel. Covers everything in the world of sports. We're talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league. By Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube.